I crit using a 4th level inflict wounds and dealt 89 damage to a blue slod, killing it before even the entire party had a chance to attack it. It felt really good and really strong since we were in my druid's natural habitat anyway. DM seemed kind of upset about the insta-kill and only half the party got to attack. Next encounter, we're fighting a troll, and I crit on a flame blade attack, but the DM said I hit, but won't be doing double damage because he wants to have fun too. Have you ever encountered anything like this? And DMs, do you get sad when players tend to do a bunch of damage and kill monsters quickly? There are plenty of solutions to the problem of my players are killing my monsters too quickly. However, I don't think any of those solutions include just canceling out their critical hits because you just want to cut their damage in half this session. When Matt Colville said that encounter design doesn't stop when initiative is called, I am almost completely certain that this is not what he meant. I finally left my worst D&D game yet. It took way too long for me to get out of the sunk cost fallacy and realize the simple truth that no D&D is better than bad D&D. It just feels so stupid because I wasted so much time in that game. I could have been playing Raid. Shadow Legends. That's right, Raid Shadow Legends is back sponsoring today's video. It's already got a ton of champions, but there's not much use for champions if there's not an insane variety of bosses to kill with them. Just for one example, we have Bomal the Dreadhorn, the boss of the Doom Tower, who looks like a demon straight out of your Dungeon Master's worst nightmares. If you want to slay this guy, you're going to need some help, and luckily, Raid is releasing 5 brand new champions, and they're overhauling the Champion Vault. On top of that, Raid's running a huge series of Summer Splash events for the entire month, with some brand new skins for Trundagilt Mallet to boot. But hey, if cosmetics aren't your thing, then Raid is currently running a special Deliana Chase event where you can get your hands on the amazing Deliana, a brand new legendary champion from the High Elves faction, just by logging in. All you need to do is log in and play Raid for 7 days between now and July 28th, and you get the legendary hero Deliana for free. Simple as that. Once you're in game, just use the promo code MyDeliana to get your hands on everything. Simple as that. Get 50 XP brews and instantly get your legendary hero Deliana to max level 50, as well as a ton of silver. This is a great time to get into Raid, and if you click my link in the description or scan the QR code that's right on the screen there, you'll get even more unique bonuses worth 30 bucks. That's going to be a free epic champion, Aina, 200,000 silver, 1 energy refill, 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient shard so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get in game. Once you get into the game, you can collect your rewards right here. If you guys are interested, then you can head down into the description down below, or, like I said, scan the QR code that's been on screen to download Raid Shadow Legends. As always, supporting our sponsors does support us. Thank you so much to Raid for sponsoring today's video, and with that, I'm going to turn back into an animated rat so that we can get back to the video. I'm playing in a campaign by an inexperienced DM. Being close to him, he has complained multiple times that he doesn't really enjoy it, and that the players are too min-maxy or not paying attention, etc. And even though I don't fully agree that that's true, our group isn't exactly a well-oiled machine either, so I try to be there when he wants to vent. However, it's come to my attention that he's lying about the campaign. You see, when he first started DMing, he would complain about players being difficult to manage, etc., and after a few months, I suggested he quit or let someone else take over if it was too much for him. He refused and asked me to help him with the next few sessions. I did this by helping to work out some adjustments of the source material to make it a little bit more lively. This went pretty well, but it appeared he was still unhappy, so I offered to help him in more ways to bring in certain elements sooner across the whole campaign so the whole thing went quicker for him. He was almost offended by that, even though he was regularly moaning that he didn't like being a DM at all. So I kept being a player, but having DM'd the same group previously, I started picking up on some inconsistencies. All the NPCs became the same. That's not about the voice. I mean, they all welcomed us with a smile, and then as soon as we tried to converse, bargain, warn them of the big event, and ask them for help, information, directions, etc., every single NPC became hostile. They all began with a snooty, "Well, why would someone like me help someone as low as you?" and then quickly turned to, "I'm not interested in the problem, so you'd better leave now or you'll be killed or arrested." The group are not murder hobos by any means. This was after 6 or 7 persuasion checks in 10 minutes, rolling fairly high each time. We got this attitude from shopkeepers, old mages, supposedly friendly giants, and powerful beings that a god communion literally told us would be an ally. The players all noticed the adversarial nature of the NPCs, and it became a running joke that we could ask 2 questions before they kicked us out. The DM made statements like, "You're unwashed," and "You didn't ask the right questions," and "You're speaking common," as reasons for this, and then the great big plot holes appeared. On our quest, we found an oracle in several ancient texts. Months later, he makes some throwaway comments and the game grinds to a halt. He had skipped over a lot of mythology and important information that we should have had because we had spoken with the oracle and had these ancient scrolls, but even with high intelligence and history checks, etc., this DM would not tell us. We are 18 months into a campaign that's supposed to last, according to the book, 12 to 18 months. We were only halfway done because massive chunks we should have known about were simply not being told to us. The DM claimed we just hadn't taken notes, but 3 of us were very careful to write down literally everything. NPCs who should have offered up other knowledge had been too quick to fight us before we could get anything out of them, and we'd been wasting months doing one thing when the true objective was something we should have figured out already and started preparing for months ago. So I did a bad thing. I looked up the next NPC we were supposed to meet. Not his stats, just like a vague idea of him. Surprisingly, he, along with several others we had already met, were tied to an organization that is listed as part of my background. When we were on our way to meet him, I made some passing comments about my symbols, etc., but I was suspicious and knew what was probably going to happen. I was asking for a check to see if I knew about these symbols. I rolled a 21. I was told no, despite it being something in my own backstory from over a year ago. I wouldn't know about this organization, and this NPC was definitely not part of that gang. When he turned his attention away, I double-checked. This NPC is so definitely part of that faction. He has their symbol engraved on his breastplate for all to see, and anyone from my hometown would recognize it. This faction is integral to the big event of this campaign, and now that we apparently don't know of their involvement, we need to start digging for months to figure out what to do next, since the DM had the NPC magically die the minute we started questioning him. I did not call the DM out on his lies since he hates metagaming, but at this point it's been a long, difficult campaign that I don't even enjoy anymore, and the DM is deliberately trying to stop us from completing it. I don't know why. I don't know what his plan is, but ever since I offered to help him, he has decided to take the source material and mess with it just to waste our time and make the real quest unnaturally difficult. I completely understand DMs who change the books or change modules to suit what they want for the campaign. I've done that myself and I had a good time doing so. Sometimes you love the module but want small adjustments. However, what this DM is doing is not exactly the ideal version of that. There's nothing wrong with making a campaign more difficult, but at the same time, the difficulty should be rewarding. Difficulty is fun because when you beat it, it feels good to do so. It feels like you overcame a great challenge. Here though, this difficulty is just a slog. Like the OP said, the DM is making the campaign just this endless slog through endless nothingness, where most importantly, the party don't feel like they're accomplishing anything. We talk a lot about how D&D players need to be okay with losing sometimes. You're rolling dice with 1s on them. But I feel like some DMs also need to remember that the players are rolling dice with 20s on them too. The party need to accomplish things for the campaign to be, enjoyable. Losing all the time and never making any progress, not very fun. Never really posted before, but figured I could share this story. Names edited, obviously. I had never played Dungeons & Dragons before, barely heard of it, until this happened. One day, I had just finished baking some cookies when my now ex-boyfriend told me that some of his friends were coming over so that they could host a game of Dungeons & Dragons. Me, being curious and wanting to learn more, asked him about it. He explained it was a role-playing game where you rolled dice and interacted with the Dungeon Master's world. With that explanation, I was actually incredibly interested. During this time, I was just role-playing in online forums, and a lot of the people I had been role-playing with hadn't logged on in a while. I also had nothing better to do, so I asked if I could join. My boyfriend said yes. There shouldn't be a problem. There was. After we went to the game shop next door to pick up some dice for me, his friends arrived. In total, there were 4 of us. My boyfriend, myself, the DM, and Mike. Mike was someone we both knew from work and was overall a very chill guy. The red flag came from the Dungeon Master. When I got to our table and sat down, the DM looked over at me, and then looked over at my boyfriend. My boyfriend told him she's never played before and wanted to see what it's like. We're all making new characters anyway, shouldn't be a problem, right? At no point in the exchange did the DM indicate that there would be an issue with a new player joining, so we rolled up some sheets. Since I didn't know anything about how anything worked, naturally I was asking questions about what ability scores were or how classes worked. I rolled up a half-elf sorcerer. I don't remember everyone else's races, but Mike was a rogue and my boyfriend was a wizard. And while doing this, the DM was talking to Mike and my boyfriend as they were describing their characters in detail. Then when I finished, I wanted to explain mine, and I got a, "We already spent so much time getting your character ready, let's just jump into things before we run out of time." I was a bit surprised, but I figured, yeah, we did spend a couple of hours and I did impose myself on their game. Little did I know this was the first of the red flags. We got started and right away the DM wanted to give everyone a special item for their character, and he stated the higher the roll, the better the item. Mike rolled first, rolled decent and got a dagger. My boyfriend rolled a little higher and got a level 1 spell scroll. Then it came my turn. I rolled my d20 and it was a natural 20. I knew that was really good because Mike was applauding me. The DM, however, did not seem too happy that I rolled a nat 20, and he took a minute to get my item. What I ended up with was a wand of scorching ray, where I could shoot 3 shots of fire at a time. Mike and my boyfriend loved the item and knew it would be useful in fights coming up, and showed me where to mark it down on my sheet. However, afterwards, things got weird. We had our first encounter. Simple enough, just some goblins. We rolled initiative. I noticed right away that for some reason the goblins were only going for me because I looked like a valuable target, which is funny considering I had never described what my character even looked like or what kind of person she was, but I let go because the DM was the expert, right? Luckily, the DM rolled so low that he didn't hit my character's armor class. Then came my turn and I used the wand. I rolled and all 3 shots hit, one being a crit. I rolled damage and also rolled high. At this point, Mike is just laughing and my boyfriend tells the DM, "Sorry, she has stupid luck sometimes." And while those two are laughing, the DM was not. He looked pissed and extremely frustrated. Whenever I asked a question about how something worked, his responses just kept getting snappier at me. A few more moments pass, and Mike and my boyfriend are role-playing together. It was fun to see, kind of a kinship between brothers, and how Mike's character would do his best to get my boyfriend's character all the books in the world. I thought this was the moment to chime in with my character, but just as I opened my mouth, DM goes, "Does a 25, a 21, and a 22 hit?" We all pause, and because we were only level 1, of course that hits. He then rolls damage, and what proceeds to happen is this. He doesn't say out loud what everyone's damage is. He goes over and whispers it to everyone like it's a big secret. Mike gets hit, but all it does is scratch his skin. My boyfriend gets hit, and the same thing happens. Then I get hit, and I'm dead. Yup. Dead by a goblin arrow. I would like to say, as someone who has played a lot of D&D in the present, I did not know about death saves. I just lost my character out of nowhere. Mike and my boyfriend proceed to take out the goblin, but I was still dead. I'm at the point of panic, so I ask, "Is there a way I can come back?" To which the DM goes, "Nope, you're dead. The only way for you to keep playing is if you make a new character, but we already spent so much time on you that I don't want the rest of the day to be making another character, so I just gotta play, okay?" I look to my boyfriend, and he doesn't say a word. Mike just looks awkward in the whole thing, but bless his soul, he said that he fashioned a makeshift carrying device so that he could lay my character's dead body on it, and so he could bring it with them if they could revive me. Spoilers, they didn't, or rather the DM did not want them to. And my boyfriend took my wand because it would be a waste of a good item. But I'll never forget the DM saying, "It is probably better in the hands of someone who can use it right." This DM is saying a lot of dumb things, but use it right? It's Scorching Ray, one of the most simple offensive spells in D&D. How exactly do you use it wrong? At this point, I feel like shit. I don't even have high confidence in the first place, and I hate conflict, so I don't want to call this guy out for being a jerk. In my own apartment, by the way. So I left the table and went into our bedroom and played Pokemon. Granted, I still got up and brought them my freshly baked cookies and some drinks. I may have been upset, but I still wanted to be a good host. DM just ignored me whenever I walked by. Still ate my cookies, though. After they finished their game, they left, and my boyfriend came to check on me. He also said that it looks like they won't be having any more games here anymore. Turns out the DM canceled everything because he thought it would be a game with the boys, and he didn't like the fact that Mike's character was still carrying around the reminder that I invaded his game and had no intention of stopping. I told my boyfriend that I wouldn't ask to play anymore, and that one session made me hate D&D. It wouldn't be until several years later where I would be asked to play again with a new friend of mine. After some talk, my friend got me to play with him and some other friends, and now I love D&D. We still play to this day, and I have discovered my love of being a DPS, like barbarians, paladins, and my personal favorite, monk. I even DM myself. I'm no longer with my boyfriend. There were other red flags in that relationship I won't get into, but he was very emotional. But I do hear from Mike every now and then. He told me that he went on to take his rogue to another game, and in honor of me, he made his backstory that was trying to revive his long-lost sorcerer friend. He also told me that our DM had cut ties with him after he had tried to convince him to let me back in. The DM claimed I had to have cheated, because there's no way a newbie can roll that good, even though all of our dice were out in the open. And besides, I didn't belong anyway. I should just stick to baking, because that's all I'm good at. Lovely. Like, he agreed to have me play at the table. If he was so against me, he could have just said no and avoided all of this. Well, DM, if you ever find this, I am now with a group that appreciates my contributions. I am also the main note taker of the group because I only invest myself in good stories. And yes, I still roll high, and I don't cheat. Roll 20, make sure of that with my nat 1 death saves. TLDR, DM is so upset of a newbie girl joining his group who rolls really high and decides to instant kill her to get her to leave the table that she was invited to. P.S. The cookies were pumpkin chocolate chip, and they were delicious. Hell yeah for baking. Baking is cool, do not let anyone tell you otherwise. The OP already summed up the main issue, besides the possible casual sexism. The main issue being that the DM, if he really did not want her to join, could have just said no. Bullying a player out of your D&D game is not a solution to anything. It's just petty and childish. Look, if you don't want people joining your game out of nowhere, that's perfectly reasonable. My D&D group meets up at my friend's house, and his sister regularly watches us play. If one day I arrived at the game and she wanted to join that session right there at that moment, I'd probably tell her no, because I would want to give it a week and have a session 0 with her so we could make a character together. What I wouldn't do is have her join the game and then bully her out of it for the lulz, I guess. Also, the boyfriend, yeah, kinda sucks, but Mike's a real one. Be more like Mike, everyone. Okay, so unlike my last story, which is still hanging over my head, grinding my gears, I wanted to share this story because honestly, it's just funny. So this was my first experience playing D&D ever, and I had no idea what I was getting into. I was about 18 at the time, and I was in a teen show at our local community theater. I was the oldest member of the cast, but I still got along pretty well with some of the younger cast members who were around 16. There were also younger cast members, mostly 13 or 14, but because of the age gap, I didn't really talk to them the same way. I treated them as equal cast members, of course. The last thing I wanted to be was the experienced actor who treated everyone new as though they were nothing and was a condescending asshole. In any case, at that time, I could really feel the effects of the age gap. 14-year-old boys are probably the worst people in the world. Anyway, one day I was talking to a couple of the older girls, and we were all starting a conversation about how we wanted to play D&D, but never got the chance to play before. We ended up chatting with the play director about it, and she told us that her husband was a DM, and could play a campaign for some of the cast on a weekly basis in between rehearsals. So, we set it up. We ended up inviting the assistant director and the stage manager of the kids show to come play with us. Keep in mind that all of these people are closer to my age than some of the cast members. At the time, they were all adults, along with 3 16-year-old cast members, including my younger sister. So altogether, that made 7 players, 4 of which were adults. Anyway, my sister and I showed up for the first session, and I immediately had a bad feeling about this. Because I'm in that room, I saw at least 15 people sitting around one table. Most of them were cast members, including some of the younger boys I mentioned before. Apparently, word about this cast D&D group had gotten out to the moms, and one of them took it upon herself to make the whole thing a big cast party. This mom provided food at least, which was nice, but even with my lack of experience, I knew that 15 people was way too much for one campaign. On top of that, this mom decided it would be a good idea to let her younger son, who I believe was 11 at the time and not a cast member at all, play with us. I didn't say anything though, and the DM acted like this would be perfectly fine, so I just went along with it. I think we started out raiding a dungeon, and as you'd expect, it was nearly impossible to get a single word in with so many people playing. I got to make one move during combat before having to wait who knows how long to do anything else before the battle was over, and anything outside of combat, forget about it. But a huge problem emerged from this 11-year-old who was playing with us. This kid, as you'd probably expect, had major main character syndrome. Now, I'm not blaming the kid, and I'm not calling him a bad person for this. After all, he's a kid. This is par for the course. But the problem with that is that he kept wanting to split from the party and do his own thing. We all decided to go left, he goes right. We kept telling him, no, stay with the party. We have too many people to have one person split off like that and take up so much time. But the kid did not get it. I think he didn't like being told no, which again, is something expected from young kids. He kept trying to do it until the DM finally let him. He ended up getting attacked by a bugbear, if I'm not mistaken, and we had to come and save him. And he was not happy. Anyway, it was what it was. After that first session, I went home feeling like that was not at all what D&D was. At least not real D&D. I just shrugged my shoulders though and hoped the next time would be better. I showed up with my sister again the next week, ready to play again, but when I went into the room, it was completely empty. I heard some noise coming from the theater, so I went in and saw the assistant director and stage manager working on some set pieces for the show. I waved to them and asked them where everyone was, and they looked at each other with a knowing gaze and said, "No idea. We were kicked out," and I was shocked. Turns out this 11-year-old kid went home to his mom and complained about how mean the adults were at the D&D game, how he kept yelling at him and being mean to him or whatever. So his mom went to the Facebook group chat and declared that it was inappropriate for adults to be playing with children and kicked us all out, saying she would host at her house. No one over 18 was invited, which included the director, but not the director's husband, of course, because he was needed to DM. But the director of the show, the assistant director, booted from the cast party D&D game. The only reason I missed this was because I wasn't part of the Facebook group chat. Needless to say, I was stunned. The kid wasn't even invited with us in the first place, and this mom thinks she can kick out the director while keeping the director's husband around? Obviously, he declined. Now I look back on this and laugh. The mom never got around to hosting any more sessions, and the adults went ahead and started our own campaign. This also fizzled out for unrelated reasons, but I find it really ridiculous how entitled this woman was. In the end, it makes for a really funny story, at the very least. TLDR, Karen mom turns D&D session into a cast party, gets mad when her son showed up uninvited, complains about how mean the adults were, and kicks us out of our own game. Unless the D&D game is full of kids, throw in an 11-year-old to pretty much any game and it's definitely going to become a problem. On top of that, 15 people in one D&D game is just something that I cannot possibly handle. I cannot even fathom how that would work. I mean, I had one guest player join my own campaign just because he wanted to play D&D again, and we had a lot of fun, but that was a lot more on my plate. Even just adding one person. Having 15? Holy hell. No thank you. It is a nice change of pace to have a high school story that isn't necessarily caused by high school kids' stupidity. It's mainly caused by a Karen mom. Which, yeah, that does really suck. But hey, it's probably for the best. Everyone who actually wanted to play, I'm assuming, went off to start their own game. So, great. In this case, all's well and ends well with this RPG horror story. Back in 2020, I had a GM who wanted to run the Ravnica setting. Not my thing. I kind of hate the setting, but whatever. D&D is about hanging out with people and making character arcs. I like to try and make mine unconventional. Maybe a fault of mine, but I had decided. A Warforged samurai named Mary. She was a robot maid who fought with a glaive that was actually just a long feather duster with a retractable blade. Her backstory: she was commissioned by a high-ranking member of the Izzet League, Magitech faction for those who don't know, specifically as a protector and steward of their home. The lord had a wife and son, Aiden. One night, the manor is attacked by assassins, and the parents both die, leaving Aiden as the last surviving heir, with Mary tasked to protect him. She had her charge go into hiding while she tried to figure out who the assassins were so she could ensure his safety. Before we started, I told the GM my concept. We discussed her, talked about her character and other characters with the other players, and I specifically told him how I knew my character could be kink material, but she was specifically ace and didn't have any bits or anything. She was basically a super advanced Roomba who has to take care of a 10-year-old. So in-game, my little lord has to remain kind of close to me. I hide him away in combat, but the assassins are always after him, and I have no idea who said assassins could be. Point is, kid's always by my side. So there's this demon... this demon going on, okay, that the rest of the party is kind of stuck doing, but I had the foresight to not take the 10-year-old boy to it. Instead, we meet up with an old contact and a friend of the kid's father. With the kid present, he proceeds to spew out some backstory about how I was a repurposed sex robot. Mind you, the kid is still there, but it's not a huge deal if you don't traumatize the kid. I told the other character to not say anything about that, and that was that. Would have been played for awkward laughs. It's a way better alternative than what would have happened, because I had to remind my GM that we were not at the demon. I'm not a person who shies away from NSFW stuff, but I do care about my characters. I specifically did not want her to be this, and I had told the GM prior. My biggest regret is not calling him out at the table. I just rolled with it instead, but it made me angrier than I expected it to. Ultimately, we just finished the campaign, but I won't be sitting at his table again. My character got none of her plot hooks, no assassins, no struggle for succession, or even able to go through any of the plot arcs that I wanted her to go through with the kid. She was supposed to be a helicopter mom who had to learn to be less toxic while also developing emotions and such. As a whole, this campaign was kind of not fun. Some good scenes and encounters here and there, but this guy just wanted to drop all the Magic the Gathering fan service on a bunch of people who never played the game, while disregarding all of our own plot hooks in favor of a big Save the Multiverse storyline that none of us were really invested in as players. There are so many problems here. I don't want to talk about the demon happenings or why the DM had to be reminded that there wasn't a child there. I'm not going to think about it because we're moving on. Okay, everything else. Look, players do have control over what their character is. They wrote their character, and they want to play the character that they created. If a DM suddenly railroads their character into being something else, that is a pretty dick move. If a DM railroads a character into becoming a literal porn doll, that is horrible. Even if it's in the backstory, not talking to the player about that first is absolutely gross. If a player signed up for that, or if you had like an out-of-game discussion to like talk it over first, I guess I'd kind of get it. But this DM literally sprung that backstory twist in the game during roleplay. Dick move. Also, if characters give you story arcs to work with, try to work with them. Players love that kind of thing, and in my experience at least, most DMs love doing that sort of thing with players. Why this DM would railroad them away from their personal story arcs, well, I'll never know. If you see a DM like this, run the other direction. And that is where we're going to end today's episode of RPG Horror Stories. If you guys enjoyed it, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then you can check out our Tabletop Tavern Tip series, where we cover tips for both DMs and players, old and new. And while you're there in the cards, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content right as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories and thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment. The demons are doing what? To let me know you made it to the end of the video. That's all. Comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.